The crate was marked empty, and the monitor on my belt said otherwise. I'd been driving cold chain medicine out to the farm routes for 11 years, ever since my knees gave up on roofing work, and in 11 years a flagged empty crate had never once made my pulse reader chirp. I was hauling the last case of stabilizer vials to the Renner place at Aldermore Crossing, the kind of frontier stop where the barn doors don't quite close and the nearest clinic is 2 hours of bad road away. The barn had taken a beam down in the last storm, splinters and old hay everywhere, and wedged under the collapsed loft was a supply container some warehouse clerk had scanned through without looking. My monitor, clipped there to track the serum's temperature, had picked up something else entirely. A heartbeat. Slow, ragged, but there. I should have radioed it in and kept driving. I had a sick 4-year-old waiting on those vials 2 farms over. Instead, I pried the crate's ruined lid back with a tire iron. He was too big for the box. Folded into it the way you fold something that's been dying slowly and doesn't have the strength to argue about position anymore. A dragon, hide the color of rust on old iron, both hind legs gone slack and useless beneath him. A snare line, the steel kind ranchers set for wolves, had cut deep enough into his spine to do real damage before he'd chewed through it. He'd dragged himself into the only shelter he could find and the storm had finished the job, dropping a beam across him so he couldn't even drag himself back out. His eye tracked me. No snarl, no fire. Just a flat animal certainty that I was one more thing about to hurt him. Easy, I said, and meant it the way you mean it to a spooked horse. I'm not here for you. I had 2 problems and 1 box of medicine. The dragon's breathing had that wet catch to it that meant something was bleeding where I couldn't see, and the Renner boy needed his stabilizer by dark or his fever would climb past anything his mother could manage alone. I stood in that ruined barn doing math I didn't like the answer to. I split the case. 4 vials for the boy, like the order said. 2 for the dragon, because his heart rate on my monitor was dropping in a way I recognized from 20 years of watching gauges. That's the rhythm of something running out of road. I packed the wound with what I had, fence wire and a shirt and more luck than skill, and gave him both vials slow, into the meat of his shoulder where the muscle was still good. Then I sat with him through the worst of it, because leaving felt like one more thing being done to him without his say. You're going to outlive that fever before I do, I told him, mostly to hear a voice that wasn't the wind. He watched me the whole time like he was deciding something. By the time his breathing leveled out enough that I trusted it, the light outside had gone copper-colored and I had a delivery clock screaming at me. I drove the 2 remaining vials to the Renner farm fast enough that I won't repeat the speed out loud, and I told Mrs. Renner I was 2 vials short and why, because lying to her felt worse than the truth. There's a clinic relay 40 minutes north, she said, already reaching for her radio. I'll call ahead. You go back to that barn before something finds him that isn't you. I went back. I told myself it was just to check the wire dressing. He dragged himself half upright against the loft post, and there was a second set of tracks in the mud outside the barn door that hadn't been there an hour before, 3-toed, deep, the kind nothing on this farm had left. I didn't sleep. I sat with my back against a support beam and watched the open door, and somewhere past midnight something passed low overhead, slow and circling, wings cutting the cloud cover without ever landing. He noticed it too. For the first time since I'd found him, something in his ruined posture eased. They know you're here, I said. He made a sound low in his chest, not quite a growl, that I'd swear on anything was relief. The clinic relay vials came in at 2 in the morning, carried the last leg by a kid on a 4-wheeler who looked at the dragon, looked at me, and asked no questions a sensible person would have skipped either. I gave the dragon the dose meant to start real healing, the kind that knits torn nerve where the field stabilizer just keeps a body from sliding backward. His hind legs twitched for the first time since I'd pried that crate open. Not standing. Not yet. But twitching, which after dead and slack is its own kind of miracle. I told him about the boy 2 farms over, fever breaking, sleeping through the night for the first time in 3 days, because it felt like something he should know he'd had a hand in, even split 4 vials and 2 in a long bad night. Dawn came up gray and then gold, the way it does out on the crossing, and the barn door I'd been watching all night filled with shadow. She didn't duck to fit through it. She didn't need to, the doorframe had already given way under the beam, and she came through what was left of it like she owned the ground underneath. Scales the deep, banked red of a coal that's been burning a long time, old burn scars along one flank, a presence that made the hair stand up on my arms before she'd said a single word. The dragon I'd been sitting with all night made a sound I hadn't heard from him before, something close to a child's cry, and tried to drag himself toward her on legs that still wouldn't hold. She crossed the barn in 2 strides and put her head down level with his, and for a long moment neither of them moved, and I understood I was watching something I had no business interrupting. When she finally looked at me, it wasn't gratitude in her eyes. It was closer to suspicion, the kind that comes from a long memory of what men with snare wire usually want. "I didn't set that trap," I said, because it needed saying out loud. "No," she said, and her voice was a weight more than a sound, felt in the floorboards as much as heard. "You did not. You split your medicine instead. Half for a child you have never met. Half for one of mine, with no name to give you and no debt he could ever repay. He didn't owe me anything to start with." Something in her face that wasn't quite human and wasn't meant to be shifted at that, like a door opening a crack further than she'd planned. "That," she said, "is precisely the trouble. None of you ever think you're owed for it. And we have spent 3 centuries assuming that meant you'd never come looking when we needed finding." She told me his name was Toravin, last of a line that had thinned to almost nothing in a war I'd never heard of and never would fully, because she didn't owe me that story either. She told me the Vendrith Hollow kept long ledgers and longer memories, and that mine had a line in it now that wouldn't close just because I went back to driving cold cases up dirt roads tomorrow. Then she lowered her head, slow, deliberate, until it was level with mine, not a bow, nothing so formal, just a great deal of weight choosing to come down to my height instead of making me come up to hers, and let out a breath that smelled of wood smoke and something older. By noon they were both gone, Toravin carried rather than walking, legs still slack but his color better than I'd seen it. The barn looked like a barn again, beam and all, like nothing extraordinary had happened in it overnight. I finished my route 2 hours behind schedule and never wrote up an explanation, because there wasn't a box on the form for it. The Renner boys' fever broke clean. The dispatch never flagged the split case, and I never told them why. Some nights now I still hear wings passing low over the crossing on my way back from a run, slow and circling, never landing, never close enough to be sure. I don't go looking for them. I just keep my monitor clipped where it'll catch anything worth catching, and I check every crate twice now, marked empty or not, because the difference between a discard and a heartbeat turned out to be smaller than anyone had bothered teaching me.